it's already started? Should I?
I think it would be great because the partner is most likely going to introduce you. So if you could have a little, they already are sent your bio, but sometimes they don't bring it. So I would bring a little slip of paper that just has your bio, and I would ask the partner to introduce you as well.
Okay. But then when I get up after Kathy, should I reiterate a little bit who I am?
If you want to work that in rather than just introduce yourself again, I mean, see what the introduction's like, but I think it's to keep the flow going. You don't want it to be like two separate workshops.
Right.
You know, what I've done before is just say, okay, now Randy's going to take you through the next two principles, and he just takes over, you know? So so the momentum keeps going. It's not like he starts off again with his whole intro.
Okay.
But if you can work any of your stories into Elm Tree or Honoring the Game, that works well too.
Okay. Great. So the second principle is Elm Tree of Mastery, and ELM stands for effort, learning, and mistakes are okay. And this is a really important piece for us. We want to look at the scoreboard definition of winning versus a mastery definition. So what is an example of having a scoreboard definition of winning?
I would say just if you score more points than the other team. Right,
exactly. So the results. And does anyone have a guess or an idea about what we mean by having a mastery focus?
I would say it has something with the mastery of the skill, maybe in the sport.
Right. And so, you know, we found that it's really more valuable to focus on the mastery and how an athlete is doing relative to their own performance, as opposed to the results of the game. You know, athletes have a lot of nerves when they're playing in a game, and a lot of fears. What is probably the top thing that an athlete fears going into a game or playing in a game?
Failure.
Anyone have a guess?
Failure.
Failure. Great. And that's a big problem for kids, is I don't want to mess up. Okay. The fear of messing up often makes kids very nervous. And as Kathy talked about positivity, you know, if we can be more positive with them and kids can be less afraid of messing up, the more positive, the better their results will be. So what we're saying is we really want you to focus on these kids' effort. How are they doing? How hard are they working? Are they learning? And what is it that they're doing? That was a pause moment.
Okay.
So we really want to focus on their effort and how they're learning. And then if they make a mistake, let them know that that's okay. What we're not saying is don't correct them. If a kid makes a mistake, it's good to correct them, but doing so in a positive way and not punishing them if they make mistakes. So I think that's an important piece. Your mastery is, you know, how much are you in control of your game? If you're feeling like you're in control, you're going to be more confident. You're going to be less anxious. And all right, we need to pause, Kelly.
That's okay.
Because I'm like reading off my cards and it's not going well for me. I'm like thinking about what to say next. And
do you have your slides up where you can see them?
So I have the slides, I have you on half my screen, and I have these cards in front of me. I think I need to ditch the cards.
I think you should ditch the cards and just use the slides.
Yeah.
To trigger your memory.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't we start again, if you don't mind? I'm going to put you up next to my slides on my computer. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to go back now.
Yeah, that's fine.
So the second principle for PCA is the ELM Tree of Mastery, and this is based on 20 years of research. And ELM stands for effort, learning, and that mistakes are okay. You know, we found that there's a scoreboard definition of winning and a mastery definition of winning. Who can give me an example of what is a scoreboard definition? It's not a trick question. So what is a scoreboard definition of winning?
If you beat the other team on the scoreboard, you win.
Exactly. So that's based on the results. That's based on how you did in comparison with the other team. What would be anyone's guess of a mastery definition?
I think it has to do with the skills that you master.
Right. So what skills do I have? What effort am I putting into the game? And what am I coming away with in today's practice or today's game that's that's taught me something that I didn't know yesterday? What am I doing better today that I didn't do yesterday? How am I mastering my skills? I always look at the San Antonio Spurs in the NBA, and Popovich, the coach of the Spurs, always talks about the process and getting better day by day. And you really want to just focus on, did these kids get better today? If you focus on the results, they're going to be a little bit more worried and a little bit more anxious. Kids want to please you as coaches. So, if you're the kind of coach who's constantly yelling at them and making them feel worried, they're not really going to play their best. The question to you is, what does a player fear the most?
I'd say failure.
Failure or mistakes, right? They don't want to mess up. What they want is to please you, to do well, to win the game, but also in that moment to not make an error. So if they're feeling tense about each moment, they're probably going to do worse than if they're understanding that they're out here to get better, and that making a mistake is okay, and that's part of the process of getting better. They'll succeed. So that's a really big piece. The scoreboard is one way to look at it. Mastering in the process is another way to look at it, and that's what we try to focus on at PCA. So again, we talked about the mastery climate. If you have that mastery climate and you focus on mistakes being okay, a child's anxiety is going to go down, their confidence is going to go up, and what's going to happen?
They're going to do better.
They're going to do better, okay? And ultimately, that's what we want. We're not out here saying, well, we'd like kids to just feel hunky-dory all the time and not play well. No, this is a means to an end for you to win more, to play better. The situation is such that if you actually focus on the process of getting better, you'll actually have better results. So focus on efforts, learning, and let the kids know that the mistakes are okay. Mastery gives players a feeling of control, so that also has them work harder. If they know that they're in control of how they do and the effort that they give is the most important thing, well, can I control if I'm playing soccer and I kick the ball and the goalie stops it? I can't
a little
control
bit.
that.
Control how hard your kick was.
Sure, right, but the goalie is a part of that, and I don't control the goalie's movements, okay? I can control how hard I went after that ball. I can control, did I give it my best shot? So I can work harder, I can do my best, and if I know that that's the most important thing and that's what's in my control, I'm going to stick with the sport. I'm going to care more. I'm going to be able to stay in it without that anxiety. We talk about Albert Bandura, who came up with self-efficacy, and that's a situational self-confidence. So, how confident am I at a penalty kick versus, how confident am I, in playing defense? What Bandura found is that the longer or the more control you feel, the more you're going to stick with what you're doing, the more confident you're going to be in that situation. So let's look at a scenario here, and let's say your team tends to play tentatively, and you let the other team sort of determine the action. You're more on your heels, playing defensively. I want you guys to pair up and think about a situation where maybe you played with a team that had your team on its heels and playing tentatively. What would you do? What is something you might do? So just go ahead and talk to the person next to you for a moment and see what you would do in that situation. So just take 2 minutes and we'll come back to the group.
Okay.
Great. Okay, so can someone give me an example or what you guys came up with here?
Oh, I have one.
Okay, Kelly.
Well, my team this year was a young team, and so we were getting beat a lot. And the team would start out the game really aggressive, and then after a couple goals were scored against us, as in lacrosse, after a couple goals were scored against us, then I realized they were getting tentative, and then they weren't being aggressive. And, in my head, if you're losing, you become more aggressive, where it was the opposite for these middle schoolers that I was coaching. And so I just, kind of stopped and pulled them in at halftime, and I asked them what they wanted in this game. And they said they wanted to win. And I said, okay, I kind of took them through the process that you were talking about. Well, how do you win? How can you, and I said, well, how are we getting beat? And they said on loose ground balls, or we're getting beat on defense, you know, we're not keeping up with the girls. So I said, all right, the next half we go out, all I want you to do is race to every ground ball. I don't want you to worry about shooting and scoring. I want you to get to the ground balls, and I want you to try to stick with your defensive person. And if she gets by you, what are you going to do? And they said, we're going to yell to the person in front of us. So it was, I just gave them something to focus on rather than the score. I said, I want you to beat every ground ball, and I want you to communicate on defense if a girl is faster than you and if you get beat. And, you know, we didn't win the game, but they came back and played a lot harder in the second half. And they looked like they were actually having fun, because I told them I was keeping track of how many ground balls they raced to. So.
Oh, good. Well, that's great. That's a great example. And it really touches on focusing on the process and focusing on a situation that they control, going after the ground balls, as opposed to something they may not control, which is what they wanted. They wanted to win the game, but if you focus on an element that you can control, and in this case, they didn't win the game, but ultimately they're going to do better. Ultimately, they may have a chance to win the game, as opposed to fretting about whether or not they may win and playing tentatively. So that's a great example. Can anyone else give me one more example? Someone gives an example, we move on. Okay. So that's another great example. And also, you're focusing on a process, and you're focusing on something the kids can control, as opposed to focusing on the results. And that really, really helps. So great job. What we want you to do as a coach is to really notice the effort. Kids, you know, a lot of times they'll hustle and not succeed. We want to really make sure we're focusing on kids, even if they don't succeed in their effort. I try to make a point when I'm coaching to notice the kid who maybe is not as skilled and point out something that kid did that was really great. If they dove on the floor for a loose ball, or even if, you know, they sprinted back on defense and, you know, the other team did score, but they hustled back all the way. That's really important. If you really notice that kid's effort, they'll continue to give that effort, and that will be a key to their success. And one more point is the mistake ritual, and it's a really big piece of the elm tree of mastery. You know, a lot of times kids make a mistake, and 2 plays later, 3 plays later, they're still focusing on 2-3 plays earlier, and that doesn't really help them in the present moment. So how do you stay present and really just focus on the next play, the next play? Well, PCA has come up with a concept called mistake ritual. And what you'll see in the next slide is a video with Curtis Granderson, and he talks about what coach for him, what they use as a mistake ritual. You know, different coaches will say different things, you know, get over it, so what? You know, if a player makes a mistake and I see him put his head down, I'll just say, so what? Move on. You can't, of course, you don't want to make a mistake, but there's nothing you could do about it now to get it back. Okay, so just focus on the now, flush it, and move on. Okay, forget it and try to move on. So we're going to move on to this next slide here, and let's see what Curtis Granderson has to say about it. Okay, we'll then watch the video. Okay. So that's the Elm Tree of Mastery. Does anyone have any questions about this or thoughts that you want to share before we move on?
I have a quick question. Do you have the kids come up with their own mistake ritual, or do you do one as a whole team?
That's great. So it's really good if it's something that is meaningful for each kid. So if, you know, one kid has a flush it, or one kid has, you know, shake it off, whatever it may be, I think it's good for them to have that. But as a team, you also discuss it and talk about what is your mistake ritual, and you can have your own mistake rituals, okay? If the team agrees on one, then that's the one team one. It doesn't have to be an individual or a team ritual.
Okay, thanks.
You got it. All right, so we're gonna move on to the third principle, which is called honoring the game. And in honoring the game, we talk about how to perform in a positive way. And, you know, the game is important to us. We want to honor it. What PCA has come up with is a acronym, ROOTS, which stands for different things. So can someone read off those letters to me?
The ROOTS?
Right, and what they stand for.
Okay, so you're going to pull that up already?
Yes.
Okay.
So on my slide,
teammates and stuff.
Right. Okay, great. So we're going to look at a scenario here. Oh no, I have to go back. Pause moment. Sorry.
That's right.
Well, before we move on, we're just going to talk about each of the letters and what they represent. So R is for rules. And the key here is not just we don't want to cheat. That we know, all right? We don't want you to cheat. We don't want coaches to espouse that sort of play. But aren't there situations in each game where you can maybe sort of bend the rule a little bit? Maybe the official isn't looking and you can slide under a player. Forgive me, I'm a basketball guy, but there are probably many instances in soccer where you could sort of bend the rules a little bit as a coach or as a player. We really want to make sure that you honor the spirit of the rule. So what is an example in soccer where you can bend the rules a little bit?
I'd say just some defense things when the officials aren't looking. It can be a little bit rough, like grab a shirt or trip somebody, things like that. They get away with a lot.
Right. Whoever saw the video of the women's soccer game where the official wasn't looking and a girl pulled the other girl down by her hair. So we really want to make sure that we're honoring the rules and not just not cheating and not just following the rules, but also making sure that we're espousing the spirit of the rules. And O is for opponents. How do we honor our opponents?
Not talking back when they trash talk us or something.
Right. Yeah. We don't want to get involved in trash talk. We want to be good sportsmen, and honoring the game is really an advanced way, a more robust way of saying great sportsmanship. So, your opponents, you wouldn't have a game if it wasn't for your opponents. Your opponents are a gift for you. Your opponents are an opportunity for you to compete, which is what you want. These are not, sports are not in a vacuum. You need the other team, you need the other individual for you to have a game. So look at them that way, respect your opponents, and don't get caught up in trash talk and fights and things of that nature. The other O is for officials, and this is a big one for a lot of people. How many of us, I know me as a basketball coach, I've gotten several technical fouls over my career. How many coaches out here have gotten a yellow card or a red card?
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you think there's a good way or a bad way to talk to an official?
Definitely.
Yeah. And in those moments when there's a call you don't agree with, how do you bring yourself to that place where you can talk to the official in a composed manner? It's not easy, right? It's an emotional game.
Yeah.
Okay. So, can someone give me an example of talking to the official in a positive manner?
A mentor coach that I had as a coach, when she saw me coaching the one time, I asked her the same question, and she said, always go up to an official, thank them for doing such a great job in the half, quarter, whatever it is, and then say, I just have a question about the one call that you made. Can I ask you now, or would you like me to wait till after the game? And that's sort of, great. And they listen. Just always ask. They can't shoot you down for wanting to ask a question, but thank them first.
That's really good. And I wish that more coaches had the self-composure in order to do that. Again, it gets very emotional in the heat of the battle. How are you composing yourself to talk to the official? And here's what I want to say is, in my sport, I have maybe once in my 15 years of coaching seen a call be overturned because you argue with an official. You don't get the call overturned by arguing. All you do is waste your time. You model bad behavior to your players, and what you do is you hurt your chances of getting a call later. It doesn't help. It's a waste of time. Honor the officials. They have a tough job to do, and just move on. The T in Roots stands for teammates. All right. And who's ever had a situation where the best player on your team is actually the worst teammate you may have?
Yeah.
A few of you, right? And so, what do you do in that situation? Can someone tell me in that scenario, what did you do to sort of bring that player, who's your best player, back into the team fold?
We avoided that player at all costs because we were scared to death of her when we were sophomores and she was a senior. So we just avoided her.
we avoided her, so maybe she felt alienated, or maybe your teammates sort of were afraid of her and didn't want to necessarily interact with her, and that doesn't necessarily help the team bond. And as we know, bonding and chemistry is a really big part of winning. And so, how do we bring in a teammate that's not, with it, or maybe, a lot of times your best player being a worse teammate, we ignore them. How do we bring them in? How do we incorporate them so that they're more involved?
Sometimes you can have them like pair up with a student or a player that's not as good, maybe, and be their partner for a drill. But like tell them that, I wanted you to match up with Danny because you've got really good ball handling skills, and I think you could really help, Danny get better. So give them a role to play.
That's great. Okay, great. So there are different ways, I think, being positive with that player, even though they may be bringing the rest of your team down. I think, talking about how they're behaving in a group setting, if you've done so in an individual setting, that can really help. There are different ways to do so, but what we want to remember with honoring the game and our teammates is that, these teammates, we're all trying to, achieve the same goal. We're in this together, and so we want to try to espouse that with one another. We want to try to make sure that we're positive with each other, not just, as coaches with our players. And the last letter, S, is for self. Respect yourself. You guys are all an important piece of the game. You guys all care about what you're doing out here and how you come to practice every day, your energy level, how much you care. That really matters. So as coaches, you want to make sure that the players understand that they respect themselves, that they come out and that they are dressed appropriately, that their shoes are tied, that they care about what they're doing and they respect themselves. So honoring the game is an important part, and we really appreciate you guys. We're going to go over one scenario here and talk about what you might do. So we talked about it a little bit earlier when we talked about respecting officials, but let's say the opposing coach has been riding the refs the entire game and it seems to be working. Now in the final moments of a close game, the official makes a horrible call against your team. And you feel like it's because the other coach has been riding the ref.
Of course it is.
So what are you going to do?
I had this happen at a tournament this summer, and I had to breathe deeply so that I wasn't flipping out on the official. But I actually just turned to the girls that were on the bench and I said, guys, I don't agree with that call, and I don't agree with the way that coach is acting, but we're going to let the ref handle it. And I kind of just like vented to them in a way that, was trying to talk through it and kind of say, we're not going to do anything. The ref's calling the game. But, that's not the way I want to win a game, by riding the ref. I want to let the ref call a fair game. But it was really hard.
Kelly, that's great. And if you have some extra time on your hands, you should consider being a PCA trainer, because that actually brings me to my next point. One of the ways we talk about honoring the game with our players is narrated modeling. So a lot of times in these scenarios, we see what's happening and we don't, as coaches, necessarily agree with it. But it's our responsibility to show our players that we have to honor the game. We have to honor the officials. So a lot of times I'll turn to my bench in the middle of a play. I don't agree with that call, but it is what it is. We have to move on here. It's not what's important. We're down 7. Let's focus on the game. Just a quick moment to tell them, okay, well, this is what just happened. We may not agree with it, but nothing we can do about it. Let's move on, honor the game. So narrating and talking your players through, it sort of helps them with their mindset, what they need to think about in those situations. And two other things with honoring the game, we just touched on narrated modeling. Another important piece is having a self-control routine. And this is for you as well as your players, but you need to be that model. You need to have this first, then you can hope to teach it to your players. So a self-control routine, similar to a mistake ritual. If something bad happens or a call happens, you don't agree with it, what do you do in that moment? You have to have a routine, something you're going to go to so that you don't blow a gasket. Maybe it's turning to your assistant coach and giving him a signal that says, I need you right now, come calm me down. Maybe it's just a touch on your shoulder to sort of soothe yourself. There's whatever it may be, you need to control yourself in that moment. Go into a game with an intention of having a routine. Don't leave it up to chance, because it's an emotional game, you know. So have a self-control routine, prepare for those moments, and think about it ahead of time so that when the time comes, you'll be on point. And the last point, and we've touched on this a little bit, is modeling and teaching, honoring the game. These are great points that we're giving you. The idea is that you go out and you work with the hundreds of kids you're going to work with. You espouse these things to your kids. So talk about honoring the game. Teach it to them. Tell them what Roots stands for. Go over it. Okay? Maybe write it down. Hang it on the wall. And review these things with your teams as they come up. There's a ton of teachable moments where you could touch on these things again. So that's honoring the game. I'm going to pass it over to Kathy now to go into some takeaways and talk about culture.
Great. Awesome. Good job.
Thank you.
And that was good. That was good timing too.
Practice. Half hour?
You started at 2:11.
Okay. So is that good timing?
Yeah, that's like 22 minutes. Plus, I mean, people are going to talk a little bit more too.
Right.
So I think you'll have plenty of time to get discussion going, because we didn't really, you only had one person answer. But no, I think your pace was really good. I saw 100% difference when you put your note cards down.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, like your whole expression changed. Like you were talking to me, you weren't teaching me. And that's huge. You do not need the note cards at all. I would just burn them, because you're so much better. I mean, even the pace of your voice and the expression on your face, and just like you're just more animated. Ditch the cards. Absolutely ditch the cards. That was really good. I loved a lot of the stuff, just even bringing in like San Antonio Spurs right off the bat. You're bringing in current coaches. That's the kind of stuff that people are like, oh wow, this guy knows his stuff. This is great. I love the way that you were talking too about even scoreboard versus mastery. You brought in Albert Bandura. I mean, you're bringing in things that back up what you're saying that aren't necessarily on the slides. And that's where your personality can really enhance the workshop. I thought you did a really nice job with that. One thing when you said, let me see what I have down here. You said scoreboard. You phrased it correctly. You said, scoreboard definition of winning versus mastery definition of winning. And at the one point you said, we think mastery definition is better. And it was just something small that you said, but I would definitely make it a little bit stronger that, we definitely do think it's better. You came to it later when you said, it's why is it? It's to get more wins. It's to improve performance. But, when you first introduce it, if you just say, we believe the mastery focus is better, the mastery definition of winning is better, it's not as strong as saying, 20 years of research have proven that this is non-controversial. Athletes that focus on mastery will perform better. They will stick to it longer. They will work harder. Even just to say that in the beginning kind of sets the frame where it's just not a good idea. It's actually proven to help athletes do better. So that was just one little minor thing that I picked up on that I wanted to mention. The other thing is just to reference the book. You did a great job with the tools, but do you know if the partners are going to have, the people are going to have books?
So I did not contact the partner. I was assuming it's the lead trainer who does, so I don't know. Okay.
If they do, make sure you get them to look, because if the partners have spent the money on the books, we want them to look in them. So make sure that you say, and next to every one of those yellow, slide titles, there's a page number. I would say, okay, just open up real quick with me to page 39, and I want you to take a look through some of these tools while I'm going through these. And if you want, because then they can jot little notes down in the margins or little stories. It makes the book valuable to them, and for them to also know that the resources they can take home. You can't go through all 9 tools that are there. You're just going to highlight 3 of them and show them where they are in the book, and then they can, go home and I even say that sometimes, like I've only shown you 3 tools for Elm Tree of Mastery. There's a lot more mentioned, so dog-ear that page and go back to it when you get home. Great resource for you. So that was for that. What else? I just thought your conversation was great. I just liked the examples you brought up. Even just talking about failure and mistake ritual. I probably wouldn't lead into the video as much as you did. The idea of the videos being in there are that it kind of takes the pressure off of you for a few minutes. So they get to hear from Curtis Granderson about why a mistake ritual is so good. So you kind of set it up really long. I would just say, there's another tool called a mistake ritual. Let's hear from Curtis Granderson. And let's see how he used it. And then afterwards, after the video, you can say, what are some other mistake rituals that you've used? Right. No sweat, brush it off, whatever. So I would let the video do its own setup, and then you can just follow up after it. Because I love videos, because I'm like, phew, I don't have to think of anything. Let them hear from him. They respect Curtis Granderson probably more than they respect me. So that was the one comment. Just keep your lead in short.
Sure.
And then for honoring the game, you know, I thought you presented that really well. I thought you did a good job at going through each of them. The one thing that I would do afterwards is, you know, maybe have them, since you went through them a lot and it was a lot of talking, it was a lot of, you know, there's a lot of questioning, but even when you just ask a question to the group and it's just one-on-one, that's still only one person answering. So the other 40 coaches or whatever in the room can tune out. You know, anytime you can get them to think about their own experience. And so maybe a little bit more of like, you know, turn to somebody next to you, jot down a player that you know that is just, you know, when you brought up who's the best player, worst teammate. That's a great question. Everybody jot down the initials of a player you've coached that was the best player, worst teammate. Just pause for a second, let them do that. All right, now let's think about that player. What can we do to get that player involved? How did you get that player? How did you deal with that player? You know, there's a great conversation starter, and it doesn't have to take a lot of time, but it's just using a different type of intelligence rather than just ask me this, answer me this. It's not you cold calling on people. It's them. Every single person in the room can write down the initials of a player, and then it makes it more real for them.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Let me see. Oh, the other thing too, you this is a good thing. You were talking about how calls never get overturned by arguing. I think especially in light of the Olympics, it might be interesting to bring up that arguing with the official is the culture. That's what you do when you have an, you know, in a lot of the Olympic sports, they're legally allowed to argue with the official over a call. And, you know, if it gets overturned, the other team gets the ball. But that's something in our culture, not at the youth level, but at the older level, that they see modeled all the time.
Right.
And that's why I think a lot of the arguing does happen. So I like to bring up, especially, I think you're doing, is it a youth soccer team that you're doing a workshop for?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I bring that up a lot at my youth workshops. You know, what level of sport encourages arguing with an official? And they'll say pro, or, you know, again, just in light of the Olympics, I watched a lot of volleyball, Olympic volleyball, and they were challenging like every call. I'm like, what the heck? You know, this is what the coaches see. However, in your games where the officials probably rode their bike to the game and they might only be 15, is it really worth it for you to argue with the officials? You know, so just something little to bring up. And I always joke too. I once went to a workshop and I heard a trainer say, which would get you a better call on the next play? Arguing with an official or schmoozing an official? Right. And I thought that was a great question, because this trainer said, you know, if you schmooze the official, pump them up, fill their tank, make them feel like every call they're making is the best call ever, you're going to get a good call the next time. If you're arguing, screaming, yelling your head off, they're going to hate you. They're not going to make a call in your favor. So I thought that was like, it was a great, and everybody in the audience was kind of laughing. So like, schmooze the official. It will help you in the long run. I thought that was good. And let me see what else. I just put down, you know, I just thought you had really great energy and you did a nice job. Since you do have some time to play with, again, the one thing I would encourage you to do is help the coaches bring in their own experience and discuss. So even after you've gone through ROOTS and you've gotten them all and you've asked a couple questions here and there, just a little 2-minute at the end of that to say, okay, now you know the 5 areas that we talk about. Respect for these 5 areas is so crucial. I want you to just take a second and think about which area is most challenging for you as a coach. And then which area is most challenging for your team, and how are you going to change, how are you going to teach this? What are you going to put in place to teach the respect for whatever, opponents, officials? Just to give them a minute to chew on it and to just think about what are they going to do in this upcoming season if honoring the opponents is a problem. What's something you're going to, you know, really drill into your kids about honoring? What can you do? Well, maybe we'll have them go shake hands before the game. Bring extra juice boxes for the other team. You know, maybe we'll make sure that everybody on your team, and I had this happen to my daughter's team, and I was shocked, and I am a PCA trainer. The one game that we played, every single girl in lacrosse gets matched up when the game starts with another player, and every single player on the team went over and shook a girl's hand. This was like 7th graders. Shook their hand and say, hey, my name's Kelly, nice to meet you. Every single one of them. And my girls came out and they're like, they were so polite. And I thought, that's such a little thing. The coach said, when you get out there and you know who you're playing, shake their hand. And 7th grade girls don't shake hands. But, you know, they were like, they had their stick in their other hand, they shook hands, say, hi, my name's Kelly, nice to meet you. So I thought, you know,
That's
just
really
a little
nice.
example of that is a good way to just show respect
Right.
for opponents right off the bat. So, but anyway, just some ideas floating around. When it gets to the end, a lot of us tend to talk more than, you know, get them to talk. But it really, this is going to be the end of the workshop, and they've already been sitting and talking and listening for probably a good hour and a half by then. So that's when you almost have to do more to bring them in rather than less.
Right.
You can almost get away with more talking in the beginning than you can at the end.
I almost want to, you know, do something in honoring the game to get them to move or to interact a little bit.
Yeah.
Model how you would talk to an official, you know, stand up, talk to the person next to you. They're the ref in the first one and you're upset. Then they're, you know, and then switch.
That's
really
awesome. I love that. That's great. Yeah, and if it's a small enough group, you know, I think I've showed you before, I have cards, laminated cards that have ROOTS, and I stick them around the room. And I have them, okay, go to the card that represents the one that's hardest for you as a coach. And when you get there, talk to your group about why this is so challenging for you and what you're going to do about it. But I love that. I mean, model how you would talk to an official. That's great. Turn to somebody next to you. One of you is the official, one of you, yeah, that's a great idea. I love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything is, again, anything you can do. I've seen hundreds of workshops. And every single PCA trainer, when they get to the end, they talk more, not less. And it's just like, that's my critique every time is at the end of, I know you're tired too, but they are too. And even if every single time that I get a group up and on their, even if it's like, stand up if you agree, sit down if you don't, turn to a person next to you, high five a person next to you, whatever it is.
Right, exactly.
Sometimes at night, they'll be like, you know, and then they'll get up and walk around the room and they're like, oh, this is, you know, they don't want to do it. But then I get the evaluations back and they all say interaction was great. Loved interacting with other coaches. So even though they'll complain at the beginning, that's what they do. They remember it every time. I remember the one I had 11 coaches, and every time I said, okay, now I want you to get up and move over here. And they were like, oh, like you could hear it in the room. I'm like, people, come on. You want to sit there for 2 hours?
Then they come back to the group and they're like chatty and their smiles and
the whole energy in the room raises. So don't be discouraged when you see some coaches like, oh gosh, do I have to stand up and walk over there? Seriously, like, because they like it. It makes it more fun.
Yeah, yeah.
No, I'm excited for you. I think you're gonna do great.
Thank you. I'm excited too. It really, really helps to practice, like anything else, of course. Doing this today is really, it helps my frame of mind and also just refreshes me. So, and if I didn't do this, I'd be in there and like, you know, 10 minutes before I'd be looking at the note cards. And way better to just leave these alone.
You don't even
One thing, when I did the trainer day, one thing that they told me was not to read the slide as much. And if I had to read the slide, to like move to the back of the room facing the slide, so I'm behind, they don't see me reading.
So you're not turning,
Exactly. And
I would say too, like once you get better at it, you're going to know what comes next, and you're going to see. I used to actually have, it was pretty funny when I first started, I had right down in like the bottom corner of the slideshow, I'd have like Curtis Granderson's next. It was just written really, really tiny in the bottom of the slide because I wanted it to flow so well, and I couldn't remember, you know, what slide came next in the beginning. I was like, I don't know how people memorize this. And I would click and go, oh yeah, now here's a video from Curtis Granderson. So I used to have little cheat notes in the corner of the slide, or like, you know, next slide, chart, map, you know, whatever it is, because nobody even noticed it was there. It was just written really tiny in little white letters in the corner of the slide. And I would just, and I felt, they thought like, wow, she's really smooth. It was just little cheating things that helped me.
Right.
But just challenge yourself to have fun. Think about yourself as a coach. You know, what would you want to do? What would you want to get the most out of? And the audience doesn't know what they don't know. So you don't, that's why I always say, like, get rid of the note cards. If you forgot a story, I can't tell you how many times I drive home in the car and I'm like, oh shoot, I forgot to tell that story. That would have been great. Or, you know, it's okay. They don't know what comes next on the slide. They don't know what stories you forgot to tell them. They just know what they've learned in that minute. And they're gonna remember a lot more by experiencing it and relating it to their own practice and their own team, rather than just hearing it from you.
So I'm not seeing it how I see, like in my PowerPoint, I can see what slide is next, so I can sort of get an idea, but it's not going to be the case.
You have that. Yeah, I mean, do you have a Mac?
No.
Or a PC, whatever the version is, not everybody has that. And I don't know if you're using Kathy's, I don't know if she's going to have that. I have that on mine too, where I can see what slide comes next. And if you can get it, if she doesn't have it, switch it. But in the beginning, I didn't have that on my
group. See that? Will the whole group?
No. No, it's
So
just
can you
the whole group will see that. We'll see the PowerPoint. You'll see the presenter view, I think it's called.
Right. Okay. So I'm like looking at I'm standing in front of the group. There's a table with my laptop or Kathy's laptop in front of me. Behind me is the screen with the PowerPoint. Yep. So I could look at my computer, but I don't necessarily want to be like looking down here.
Right.
So
it's just, just practice. Just click through and just, just practice. Sometimes too, I won't have, like, I'll turn my laptop sideways because I don't like to stand behind the table because then you're kind of in between yourself and the screen. So I'll turn my laptop sideways so I can kind of stand to the side of the table. And I mean, I don't sit still very long. So I'm usually like one end of the room, or I'm on the other side, or I'm talking or walking up and down the aisle. Right. But there's been times when I'm like, I have to walk back and kind of just glance so that I can see what's next.
Okay.
But then, there's nothing worse than you standing there at your laptop, like, I've had people say, like, here's your laptop, here's your podium. I'm like, oh, I don't want a podium. Podiums aren't good.
Right. And just logistics, like, I don't know if this was covered. Like, if it's a 6 o'clock, should I get there at 5? Like,
I would talk to Kathy. I usually get there half hour ahead of time.
Half hour, okay.
Yeah.
And wear PCA polo and like
khakis. We just say no jeans and no sneakers if you can help it.
Okay.
Yeah. That's just kind of the rule of thumb. Cool. No jeans, no sneakers.
Yeah.
So just to look like a professional.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Okay. Cool. So my first one. So I'm excited.
That's great. I can't wait to hear about it.
Yeah.
So if you want to just touch base with Kathy real quick and say, like, here's what I'm doing. We're ready. I practiced it.
I emailed her twice now, and I've left her a voicemail, and I haven't heard back. So I'm a little bit,
Okay. She said something about she's doing some tennis.
Yeah, I think she has a new gig as a tennis director, but it doesn't help to not hear back. So
no, sorry about that.
I will now resort to text message because I have her number.
Yeah, try that.
We'll see how that goes. But
I'll send her a message too, and I'll tell her that I went over this with you and that you're planning on getting there is it 6? Did you say you're going to get there at 5:30?
It's 5:30. Yeah.
Yeah. I would. I mean, anything you can do to get yourself set up, and just to double check. She should be using this exact same PowerPoint too, but just to make sure that you're doing the same PowerPoint, because you don't want to like swap laptops in and out either.
Right. And there's recently been the new version, so.
Yeah. Hopefully, I'm counting on it that she's using the new version.
Right.
Yeah, she should be. As of August 15th, she should be. So I think you're in good hands.
Okay.
All right. Well, let me know how it goes.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye.